Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Veguilla-Lezan, and this week I'm coming back to you with another creative tutorial. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I am a freelance graphic designer and illustrator, and I run a creative shop called Bella and Sophia Creative, and I run this here YouTube channel. And what you'll find on this channel is tons of different tutorials relating to creative business, graphic design, and software like Affinity Designer, Affinity Photo, Procreate, and the like. And you'll also find a ton of vlogs kind of documenting the behind the scenes work that goes into creating the products that I sell, as well as the different things that I do, including teaching on Skillshare. I know we've been working in Procreate when it comes to surface pattern design, but I love utilizing Affinity Designer, the desktop version, as well as the iPad, but today we're going to be talking about the desktop version. I really like using Affinity Designer for surface pattern design as well. It's a really quick and easy tool to use when it comes to creating simple and complex surface pattern repeats. So this week I'm coming back to you with a tutorial on how to use Affinity Designer to create surface pattern repeats. I've shown this process in the past, but today we're going to be focusing on the desktop version, and we're going to be highlighting two specific repeats, the full drop and the half drop. Most people, when they think about surface pattern repeats, they think about full drop repeat patterns, seamless patterns. But today we're going to also be highlighting a little bit more complex and a complicated version of this, which is called a half drop repeat. So one of the most common pattern repeat styles that you'll see most people creating, or that are used by most people who are just kind of starting out in surface pattern design, is the basic full drop or just the block repeat. And it's the simplest kind of way to go about creating a repeating pattern, and that's one of the first things that we're going to go through in today's video. It's a design that's basically repeated in exactly the same positions on the vertical and horizontal axis or planes of your artboard. But to make things a little bit more interesting and to kind of add some variety to your overall skill set, I wanted to also share today how to create a half drop repeat. So with a half drop, the design is repeated on the same vertical plane in the exact same place, but when you're moving it across horizontally, it goes down half a step. So we'll get more into this in terms of the nitty-gritty when we get into the software, but just think about it as like a stepping stone. So you're going across one side of your artboard to the other, but then you're stepping down one. And that's what creates the half drop repeat. So it's not like your traditional repeat where it's going to be exactly mirrored on the left and right hand side and the top and bottom. It's only going to be mirrored on the top and bottom, and then when it comes to the left and the right side, it's going to move across the same amount of space, but then it's going to go down half of what your artboard size is. And we'll look more at this, like I said, when we jump into the software and start creating this design. So it's a little bit more complicated, but once you get used to the mechanics behind it, and once we set up our tester board in Affinity Designer, it'll make it a lot easier for you as you're creating these repeats in the future. I like to use a template that allows me to see my repeat in action as I build my tile in Affinity Designer, and that's the nice thing about it, because you can utilize artboards to do this, and you get a preview, like a live preview, right as you're working. So once we get that preview set up, you'll be able to see how it works and it repeats correctly before you export the final JPEG or PNG file that you would upload to a website like, say, SPOONFLOWER. I'm looking forward to creating with you today. Let's get started. So before we even create the template that we're going to be working in and create the live preview, I want to kind of just touch a bit on these two types of patterns, the full drop repeat and the half drop. So the first that we're going to look at is the full drop. So I just kind of pulled some peaches in from the last tutorial that I did where we created 4 different textures in Procreate. I'll link that in the description box, and then I'll also include it in the information cards above. But these peaches were just from a set that I worked on in a tutorial that we went through, and I wanted to utilize them just because they're a really easy shape to kind of work with when it comes to building out this pattern. So the first that we're looking at is the full drop, and a full drop is the most common pattern repeat system. At its simplest form, it's a design that is repeated on the same horizontal and vertical plane, and it's probably one of the easiest that you create. So what I want to highlight is on artboard 1 here, this is our tile. And this tile is repeated to create the actual surface pattern repeat. If we look at artboard 2 over here, where you see these little black dashes are basically where the pattern is lining up. So what we do essentially is we take this tile and we repeat it right next to each other and right on top. So it's repeating and it's lining up on the horizontal planes and the vertical planes. So basically the horizontal and the vertical columns are stacked right on top of each other, and it creates this really simple repeat. The thing with this though is that it can be easier to see where the repeat ends and starts, especially if you're using some more like complex patterns and things like that. But the way to basically offset this and make it a little harder to see what the repeat is to use something like a half drop. And this is what a half drop looks like. Similar to the full drop, the half drop lines up on the vertical planes here. So if we look at this over here, it lines up on the vertical plane, so the top and bottom essentially line up. But the horizontal planes, basically what you do is you're moving it across the same amount of space, but then you're moving it down half, and it creates this half drop repeat. And I just kind of like to highlight that when you're creating this repeat, say your square was cut exactly in half here, whatever is on the bottom on the left side needs to be on the top in the right side, and then vice versa. So this is what creates that repeat, and you can just build this over and over and over again to create the shape or to create the pattern that you're trying to work with. So if we pull this up, you'll see that it starts to line up. We couldn't just put this right next to each other because it wouldn't line up, but if we bring it down half a step, it'll line up. And then if we copy this shape here and we drag it up or bring it half a step up, it's gonna line up at the top. So this is how you create that half drop repeat. Basically, this just helps to allow your design to appear less obvious. So it's a great option if you're looking to create more of an organic and less obvious design where it's harder to see where your repeat starts and finishes. So to start with, let's go up into File, and then we're gonna select New. And what we're gonna do is we are gonna create an artboard that is an even number. We wanna make sure it's just a number that's easily divided by 2, because we're going to have to do a little bit of math as we're working through these patterns. So I'm just going to set my square up as an 8 by 8 inch. You can choose pixels or you can do inches. I'm just going to do inches for now. You can select CMYK or RGB depending on what you're planning to print this with. If you want to print this, I'm just going to keep it at RGB because I'm probably going to load this to SPOONFLOWER, and SPOONFLOWER does request that any files you load to their system are in RGB format. And then I want to make sure I have check marked Create Artboard, because we are going to be basically creating a live preview as you see in these examples here. And then you can hit Create. So this is our tile, our pattern tile, artboard 1. And what we're going to want to do is create essentially like a live preview. And we're going to be using the symbols functions to do that. And what's nice with symbols is basically whatever you put on this artboard will automatically show up on the next artboard that we create. So what I'm going to do is go to the left hand side. My second option below my black arrow tool is the artboard tool. I'm going to click on that, and then you'll see this little menu pop up in the upper left hand corner, and you can select document size, you can select selection, and then you can hit insert artboard and it'll add an artboard. I'm just going to change it from document size to selection, and then I'm going to make a selection that just looks a little bit bigger than my original, and it's going to create the artboard for me. And what we want to do though is we are going to basically double this new artboard in size in terms of what artboard 1 is. So since artboard 1 was 8 by 8 inches, And I'm just gonna write this so we can see. And if we're doubling that, artboard 2 is going to need to be 16 by 16 inches. And when we click on this, to make sure that this artboard is 16 by 6 inches, you can just click on the artboard or where it says artboard 2. And if we go down to the right hand side in the lower right hand corner, you'll see this transform toolbox. And if you don't see this on your toolbar here, you can just go to view and then go to studio, and then you can scroll down so that you have the transform studio check marked and it'll pop up. And then you also, while you're here, make sure you have symbols check marked as well, because we're going to be working with that. So I created this with a selection. Now I just want to make sure that it's actually 16 by 16 inches. And to do that, you can go over here to your transform tool, making sure that the artboard is selected. And down here, you'll see that it's actually 13 by 12 inches. So close, but not quite. So all we have to do is go into the width, the W, and hit 16 inches, and then go into the height, which is H, and hit 16 inches again, and then just hit enter. And it will resize this so that this artboard 2 is double what artboard 1 is, and we'll kind of work through why this is important in a second. So I'm just gonna delete these numbers for now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create our preview. We're gonna create our tile in artboard 1, and then we're gonna see a preview of what that will look like in artboard 2. And the way we're gonna do this is by utilizing something called symbols. So if we go to the right hand side and we click on where it says symbols, and like I said before, if you don't see this, just go to view and then go to studio and then select symbols, and you'll get these options, and you're able to create and sync. So what we want to do is go to the left hand side and select the square tool, the rectangle tool, and we are gonna zoom in as close as we can get. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we're gonna create a square that goes across this. And if you notice, I have a red and green line popping up. I have magnetics selected. This allows me to kind of like have everything snap into place. Some people choose not to. Just for this case, I think it's important to have magnetics turned on. So to do that, you just go to your upper menu up here, and you'll see something that looks like a U-shaped magnet. Click on that, and it's going to turn on your snapping. So you'll know it's turned off if it's grayed out, and if it's darker, you know it's turned on. So I'm going to go to my corner here. I'm going to drag a rectangle across, and I'm going to make sure that it fits and fills the entirety of that artboard. I'm making sure that's still selected. You know it's selected because it's highlighted in blue. I'm going to go down to my transform tool and just make sure that my width and my height are both 8 inches, and they are. So with that still selected, you can just select your black arrow tool, click on the square, and then what we're going to do is go to our symbols options here, and we're going to select create. And then you want to make sure sync is turned on. And again, you'll know it's turned on because it's darker. If it's grayed out, it's turned off. So click on it, make sure it's turned on. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to have that artboard selected, and making sure the symbol selection, the rectangle that you've created, is highlighted in blue and has like an orange mark next to it. We're going to copy it. And then we're going to go into artboard 2, and you'll know it's selected because it's outlined in blue. And then we are going to paste this 4 times. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these selected. And what we're going to do now is make sure we have each of these 4 squares fill up the 4 quadrants of this larger square. So with that first one selected, we are going to basically move this to each of the 4 sections, and you can utilize just your move tool, and you can use that snapping, or you can use the transform tool, and we're just going to move it on the X and Y axis. So for this first one, we'll want to move it over to the right, so we're going to work with our X axis, and we're just going to hit +8 because that is the entirety of that shape. So we want to move it across directly so that it fills into that next corner. And then we'll go back to that original shape. And then we want to move this one down. So we're going to move it along the Y axis. So we just need to hit +8. and it'll move it down exactly to that area. So the X and Y axis for this lower right hand corner is going to be moved along the X axis and the Y axis. So we're going to click on that original rectangle, and then we're going to go to our X axis and we're going to select +8, and then we're going to go to our Y axis and then hit +8 again, and it's going to drag it across and down. So now we have our live preview set up. Let's test it really quickly. So basically, I'm just going to select the circle, the ellipse tool, and I'm going to change the fill color, and you can do this in the upper left hand corner, or you can go over here to the right hand side and select your swatches. And I'm going to turn off the stroke here by clicking on that round donut shape and hitting the little circle with the red line through it. It's going to remove my stroke, and then I'm going to go into the color fill by clicking on that and then just picking a bright color that's easy to see. So I'm going to select this blue. And then I'm going to create the shape here. And if you're noticing that your preview isn't working, you want to make sure that your new shape is underneath the symbol layer, and you want to make sure that it is clipped. So you're going to drag it under, and then you're going to drag it to the right so that it clips underneath, and you're going to get this drop down arrow. And basically whatever you put here is going to show up on your preview. So wherever you move it, and you can copy and paste and add additional elements and additional layers. What we want to do really quickly, let's save this and then we'll update our layers. So let's go to File, Save As, and we're going to call this Full Drop Template. And then you can save it wherever you'd like. I'm just going to save it on my desktop to a file folder for this tutorial. What I want to do is go to my layers and rename my artboard. So artboard 1 is my repeat tile. So I'm just going to rename that by selecting with my arrow and double clicking where it says artboard 1, and it'll highlight and it'll select it, and I'll be able to revise the name. So I'm going to call this repeat tile. And then artboard 2 is my pattern preview. So I'm going to double click where it says artboard 2, and then I'm going to update the name to say pattern preview. Alright, so let's remove some of these layers off of this now. So I'm going to remove the circles by just double clicking inside of them and hitting delete. And then I am going to grab these peach shapes that I created. So all I did was open up the file that I shared from my iPad. I created these peaches on Procreate, and I just exported the file as a PSD. So I can select File, Open, and then I can go to wherever I downloaded that file, which is this PSD file, and it will open up right in Affinity Designer for me. And that's what I love about Affinity Designer. Even if you don't have Adobe programs, you can still open specific Adobe files. So in this case, I can open up a PSD in Affinity Designer. So what I'm going to do is just select the ones that I want to work with. And then I'm just going to select those layers, copy them. You can go to Edit, Copy, or Command C. And you could select multiple layers by just clicking on one, holding Shift, and selecting the others. You could also do that in the Layers panel by clicking on it, holding Shift, and clicking the additional layers. And then I'm going to Command C, copy it, and then I'm going to go into my full drop template, and I'm going to paste these in, and they're going to be rather large, so I'm going to resize these down. I'm going to drag them off my artboards. You can drag things and elements that you're working with off your artboards, and you don't have to worry about them exporting within your file. And this is just like an easy way to kind of keep track of elements that you want to work with. So I'm going to resize these down a bit. And then I'm just going to make a few copies of them so that I have elements to work with. So like I said, we're going to be working with the full drop, and this is the simplest version of a repeat pattern to create. So basically, whatever we put on the left hand side edge, we want to make sure we have that on the right hand side, and then whatever we put on the top edge, we want to have on the bottom edge, and then we'll just kind of line things up in the center to create that full drop effect. So I'm going to take some of these and I'm just going to kind of play around with them. So remember, whatever you put on the top has to be on the bottom. Whatever you put on one side will have to be on the other side. So in this case, if we put this in the corner, we're gonna wanna make sure we put these in all corners. So we'll click on that first layer, and if you're noticing nothing is popping up in your pattern preview, again, just drag your element so that it's in your symbol, underneath your symbol square, and so that it kind of clips into it. So you drag it down and then to the right, and then you want to make sure it has that little orange line right next to it. So now that we did that, we see that it's set up here. So what we want to do is whatever we put on the left side, we got to put it on the right side. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it, Command C, Command V, and it'll paste right on top. And then we're going to be utilizing the transform tools here. And I'm going to bring this up a bit just so that it's easier to see. So in my transform functions here, what I need to do is make sure that wherever this is, I'm pulling it exactly along in that same position on the opposite side. So to do that, what we need to do is go to our X axis, and then we're going to select +8 because that is the size of this original square, and it's going to move it exactly to the right hand side. And then what we need to do is whatever is on this top edge, it has to be on the bottom edge. So I'm going to copy this again, so Command C or edit copy, and then I'm going to Command V, edit paste, and it'll paste right on top in the same section. And then we're going to go into our transform tool here, and we're going to be moving up and down. So we're going to be moving on our Y axis. So what we'll do in the Y function here, we're going to hit +8 and it'll move it down. So now you see our repeat beginning to build. Now I'm going to take another one of these peaches and I'm just going to bring it to the center here. And I'm going to, again, make sure it's in my symbols area, and then I'm going to copy it, Command C, and then paste, Command V, and then I'm going to go to my X axis again and hit +8, and it'll move it exactly to where I need it on this right hand side. And now you're starting to see this repeat start to build and each of the elements fitting in place where it needs to be. So now let's fill out the center. So I'm going to start with my top edge first and move it up to where I'd like it. It makes sense here, I think. And then I'm going to hit Command C, Command V, or you can do edit, copy, edit, paste. And then because I need to move it from the top down, I'm going to go to my Y axis and I'm going to select +8, and it'll drag it right exactly where we need it in the bottom center area. Now what I need to do is fill out this middle area. So I'm going to take another one of these, click inside of my tile, paste it, and then just kind of move it around. And once you add your last peach to the center, it'll fill out and you'll see this complete full drop repeat. This particular print kind of highlights how this is really about kind of stacking the columns and the rows to get this really clean basic repeat, also known as like a block repeat. Very simple pattern to create. So this is the full drop. You can save this, save as. Once you save it, you can do any final minor touches that you might want to do. So in this case, I think I want to change the background color a bit. Let's go down to the rectangle here, and then I'm going to make sure that there is no outline. And then I'm going to go into the color option here, my fill color. I'm going to click on it to make sure it's pulled to the front. And then I'm just going to double click it, and then I think I'm going to work with a blue. And then what's nice is, again, because you see the live preview, you can see what it looks like with these different color selections that you may be working with. I think I'm going to select kind of like a light blue, kind of like a soft baby blue, and then I'm going to select close. And then what we'll want to do is save this and then export it. So we're going to save this once more, file save or file save as, and then making sure that the repeat tile is selected. You'll know it's selected because it's highlighted in blue. what we want to do is export this. So we're going to select File and then Export, and then you can export it as a PNG or a JPEG, whatever, you know, whatever your print-on-demand site, or, you know, whatever those requirements for the print-on-demand site that maybe you're using or that the printer you're working with requires. I'm just going to export this as a JPEG because it does have a colored background. Say it was transparent, then I would utilize something like a PNG. But in this case, I'm just going to select JPEG, and then what we'll want to do is make sure the quality is at the highest, the preset is the best quality, and then we want to adjust our area. If we exported the whole document, everything on our workspace would be shown. So what we want to do is we just want to select the artboard that we're working with. So in this case, we want to select the repeat tile. So we're going to select that specific artboard, and then we're going to hit export. And then you can save it to wherever you want to save it on your desktop or whatever file system you have here, and then hit save. And then what we can do is test it once more. So I'm going to select this rectangle tool here, and I'm going to create a rectangle off to the side, and then I'm going to select this fill tool. If we click on that, you'll see these options up top, and what you want to make sure that the context is selected as fill, and then we're going to change our type from solid to bitmap. With the bitmap option, you're able to select JPEGs or PNG files to fill your shape with. So in this case, we want to find that full drop template that we've created, that tile, and then we're going to hit open, and then it'll fill it for you, and then you'll see these little arms here, and you can adjust the size and you can adjust the orientation, and this is what you get when you fill it. So you know that your pattern is working well. Obviously, if you want to have this more complex, or maybe you want the shapes larger, you can revise those in your repeat tile here. Now let's jump into working with our half drop. It's a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to show you how I repeat this entire process. So once I've saved this, I'm just going to delete everything off of this, and then we're going to reuse this, but we're going to modify this just a bit. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to change the name of my file now from full drop to half drop, and I'm just going to save it in the same exact place. So I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to go into my repeating tile here, and I'm just going to delete these elements. And just to direct select, you can just use your black arrow tool, double click, triple click until you get a direct selection of that shape that you're working with, and then just delete those elements off your page. So what we're going to do here is kind of backtrack a bit, because we need to play around with the placement of these repeat tiles. So we have our symbol already created, and just make sure there's nothing else on your artboard one, your repeat tile artboard. What we want to do is make sure the symbol is selected, and what we're going to do is copy it, and we're going to do things just a little different with creating this preview piece here. So just like what we did before, we're going to copy the symbol, and then we're going to paste it, instead of 4 times, we're going to paste it 5 times. Now that we've pasted our 5 squares into our pattern preview, now we have to kind of work through building this out like a puzzle. This half drop is staggered, so even though we only have 4 tiles that we're kind of working with, we've added an additional tile in order to create the full square that we're working in. So you'll understand why the 5th tile was pasted in a second. But remember, you're taking this original from the left, you're moving it right, and then we're moving it by half down. So if our original square is 8, we're going to move it down by 4. So half of 8 is 4. So just keep in mind what your original size is. You're going to divide that in half, and that is what your measurement is going down along your y-axis. And I'll create some lines here just so that we can see what we're working with here. And I'm going to bring this to the top so you can see where you're working and how this is moving along the x and the y-axis. So I'm going to do that for our horizontal axis, and I'm going to do that as well for our vertical axis, just so that we can see what we're doing. You don't want to have this on yours. You can add this to yours if you want, just to kind of get through the process of building this, and then you can take it off once we begin to build the repeat with the elements. It's almost as if we were dividing this into 4 quadrants. And I'm just going to add an additional line so you can see where these additional quadrants are. All right, so we're going to take this first square and we're going to move it to the right. And if you have magnetics turned on, you can do this and you'll see red and green lines pop up, and you can just use that, or you can just use the transform tool. So I'm going to move it to the right, and then I'm going to move it down half to that line. So that we're to that first quadrant line. So if we do this with math versus just the visual, what you'll notice is that with the x axis, we're going to hit +8 because we're moving a full quadrant over. And then with our y-axis, we're going to do +4 because we're just moving down half of this quadrant, and then hit enter, and you'll see it fills half of that upper quadrant. And now we want to go back to the original tile, click on it, and we're going to move it over and down to this lower right hand quadrant. So to do that, we're going to go to our x-axis and we're going to hit +8, and it's going to move it over. And then we need to move it all the way down to this bottom quadrant. So if we have divided these in half, so it's 4, 4, 4, 4. So that's 12. So what we need to do is hit +12 in our y-axis and hit enter, and it'll bring it all the way down to this bottom layer. Now what we need to do next is go back to that pattern tile, and then we need to drag it down so that it fills this bottom layer. So all we need to do is just move a full quadrant down on the y-axis, so that would be +8, and it'll fill that bottom left hand quadrant. And then we'll go back up to our final tile, the 5th one that we created, and we're going to move it over and up so that it fills this area here. So what we'll do is click on that, and then we're going to go to our x-axis, move it +8 so it pulls it all the way over to the right. But what we need to do is have it go up into this last area here. So to do that, we're going to go to our y-axis and we're going to select -4 because we want it to go up. All right, so I know that was a little complicated, but now we can delete all the lines. Everything that we need is now selected and placed, and we can begin to test out the pattern preview. So what we'll do first is just go to whatever you have on your, outside of your workboard, and just copy it, and then go into your repeat tile and make sure you're in the symbol. So just double click so the actual symbol is selected, and then hit paste, and everything should work. If you see it showing up in all of the sections, you know you've placed it correctly. Now comes the second part of the puzzle here. So now that we've set up the preview, now we need to begin to work on the actual tile here. So if that repeat tile here was split in half, once again, I'll create another line so we can see. If it was split in half, once again, the rule of thumb here is whatever you have in the upper left-hand side needs to be in the lower right-hand side, and then whatever you have in the upper right-hand side needs to be in the lower left-hand side, because of the fact that we're staggering this repeat. So I like to start with my edges and then work top to bottom and then fill the center. So keeping in mind those kind of like rules of thumb, so because I have this peach here in the left-hand side here, I'm going to need it in the lower right-hand side. So I'm going to select that peach, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to hit paste. And then I'm going to go into my transform tool, and I'm going to go to my x-axis, and I'm going to hit +8, and I'm going to move it all the way across. And then for my y-axis, I'm just going to select +4, and it'll move it exactly where I need it to be. Now I'm going to take another one of the peaches and I'm going to bring it into my repeat tile, and I'm going to build out the additional sides here. I'm going to bring it down to my lower left hand quadrant. I'm going to hit Command C, Command V for copy and paste. And then I'm going to go to my transform tool, and in this case I need to move it to the left and up. So I'm going to go into my x-axis and I'm going to select +8. And then I'm going to go into my y-axis and I'm going to select -4. Because I'm going from bottom to top, I need to use a negative. And again, it only needs to be half of that original number. All right, so you're starting to see the repeat build. Now we can start to add in our top edges. And I'm just gonna drag this up top here. I'm gonna actually copy this and I'm gonna paste 2 in. And if you're noticing that they're not showing up in your preview, again, just make sure it's in your symbol. Once I've placed those peaches in my upper edges, what I wanna do is select both of them, copy them, and then paste them. And then I don't need to worry about the x-axis in this case. We just need to worry about the y. So what we're going to do is go to my y-axis and I'm going to hit +8 so that it goes all the way to the bottom. Now I'm going to get rid of this line so that we can start to play around with placement in the center. So they don't all have to be in one direction. You can adjust the direction, which I find ends up helping create a better seamless repeat if your elements are in, different directions. You can always go back in and revise those edges, but I find that if you kind of play around with the placement of the elements in the center, it kind of helps to offset, what that looks like. So I'm just gonna pull in some additional peaches, paste them in, make sure they're underneath the symbol, and then I'm going to kind of play around with placement and adjust the direction. That way it doesn't feel so one directional. And so it fills the space a little bit better. All right, now that you've placed everything, now you can kind of look at this pattern preview and just kind of eyeball it, see what it looks like, make sure everything looks okay. Make sure that there's no issue with the repeat in terms of seams. I don't see that, but I do feel like I've got some sparse areas here, so I can play around with the placement of the peaches a little bit better so that there's not so much space in between some of these columned areas here. And I'm noticing that there's like a very noticeable column here, so that's telling me that these peaches on my edges are what's causing some of my issues here. So to make this a little bit more organic and not so one directional, I'm just going to rework these edges. So I'm going to just adjust the orientation of the peaches on this left edge and adjust their placement. So I'm going to select this lower left hand peach. I'm going to copy it and then paste it. And then I'm going to go to my transform tool and I'm going to go to my x-axis and I'm going to select +8. And then I'm going to go to my y-axis and I'm going to select -4 because I need to move it up, and I need to move it up half a step. And then I'm going to go to this upper left hand peach and I'm going to copy it and then I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to go to my transform tool and I'm going to go to my x-axis and I hit +8. And then I'm going to go to my y-axis and I'm going to select +4 because I'm going down this time instead of up. So when you go down, you do a plus, and when you go up, you use a negative sign or a subtract sign. And now I can just kind of play around and rework the inner peaches here. And I think I'm going to revise these top ones just a bit as well. And again, we don't need them to be always in the same direction. So I think I'm going to turn one upside down or maybe to its side to fill up the space a bit better. and adjust the placement of the second one as well. And then I'm going to select both of them, copy them, paste them, and then remember we don't have to worry about the x-axis when we're going from top to bottom. We just have to worry about y, and in this case we just need to hit +8 and it'll drag them down exactly where we need them. Alright, and then once we're done kind of playing around with placement, you can see your pattern preview, and then we can test out this pattern on a larger swatch here. So that's what I like about this preview. It allows you to kind of see the flow of your pattern and your tile as you're creating it. And then what we can do is also just test this repeat tile itself. So what we can do is make sure we select File, Save As, and we're going to save this as our half drop template. And then I'm going to save it in my project file. And then I'm going to export the repeating tile here. So I'm going to select File, Export, and then I'm going to select JPEG. And then I want to make sure that the area selected is the repeat tile. And then make sure best quality is selected, and then hit export, and then just save it wherever you plan on saving it. And then what I'm going to do is actually place this and build this. You can't really utilize the bitmap option here, your fill option with a half drop repeat, because it's not going to fully work. So we can try it. But I'm going to show you how I prefer to place it. So let's just go in and select a square here. And then we're going to go to our fill tool, and then we're going to change our type from solid to bitmap. And then we're going to select our half drop template, and then we'll see why this doesn't quite work. Because when we look at it, it shows it just does a straight repeat with these, right? So what we need to do, so we can delete this, what we need to do is build the repeat with the tile. So what I suggest you do is select File, Place, and then place the actual half drop tile into your file here. And then what we're going to do is build this. So remember, what we're doing is a half drop. So we can't just place them right next to each other like a block repeat. We have to drag this down half a step. And now you'll see already that our repeat tile is working. So we'll copy and paste, and we'll drag these elements down. So I'm going to copy this again, and then I'm going to drag this and just start building this like it is a puzzle. So I'm going to copy this and paste it, and then just start lining these elements up. So I'm going to copy these, paste them, drag them, and then remember it's down a half. And then anything on the vertical can just go right on top of each other. What's nice though is with SPOONFLOWER, you're able to actually upload a half drop and select that option in your file setup. They're a really lovely style of repeat to play around with. I know it takes a little bit of time to kind of wrap your head around how the repeat works, but I hope I did a good job with this one. I know it's a little bit more complicated, but that, again, working with creating the pattern preview kind of highlights how the tile itself works, so you're able to better piece together the placement of your motifs in your original tile. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you feel a little bit more comfortable designing full drop and half drop repeating patterns in Affinity Designer. If you end up making something and sharing it, say on Instagram, definitely make sure to tag me in it. You can find me over on Instagram at Bella Sophia Creative. Just tag me. I would love to see what you create as you work through your process and see what your final products are. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.